friends. Welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. I'm CJ. This is the Coding Garden, and today we're going to be working on a Vue app, a Vue.js client. We started this last week, but this app is in a series on TypeScript. Ciao! Hello, everybody. Nice to see all your faces. Thanks for all the peepo hays. Well, yeah, this is probably the fourth or fifth video in a series where I'm writing a bunch of TypeScript stuff and teaching TypeScript stuff. So if you check out my YouTube channel, the most recent edited videos all have to do with TypeScript. So I did an intro to TypeScript video about a month ago, and then we built a backend API with Express in TypeScript about a month ago. And then we set up a React app to be ready to build a TypeScript app about 3 weeks ago. And then we built a CRUD client with React, but that has not been edited and uploaded to YouTube yet, but it will be eventually. And now we're essentially building that exact same app, but with Vue.js instead. So that's it. And last week we set up the app. So last week we got a basic Vue.js app going, and we have the basic find all items web page. If you tuned in last week, you saw how amazing Vue is and how amazing the Vue CLI and the Vue ecosystem is. What took us 6 hours to set up for React, so if you look on the YouTube channel, this video, set up Vite, I can't point to it, but set up Vite with React, TypeScript, ESLint. It's an hour-long video. That was actually a 6-hour stream that then got cut down to an hour. We got the exact same setup with Vue and the Vue CLI in about 5 minutes, just from just using the Create Vue app, and it's kind of a breath of fresh air. And also we got everything else working too and set up, and we have my linter set up the way I want and prettier, and I miss Vue. It's been a while since I wrote some Vue code, so that's what we're going to be working on today. I can go ahead and spin it up to show you what it looks. Yeah, there's just not a good solution for it. I mean, people would say the solution is, well, use Next.js, but that's not what we're doing here. That's not what we're doing. Okay, so I'm going to first spin up the backend. So this is going to start an Express API that's talking to a Mongo database. So once this is up and going, I think it's ready. Yeah, waiting for connections. It should be ready. Now I can start up my my Vue client. It's running with Vite, and if we open this up, we should see a loading spinner, and then we have one to do, which is learn TypeScript. So that's basically all we got working last time. Is we have this landing page, and then it lists all of the to-dos that are in our database. And today we're going to work on creating new to-dos, updating existing to-dos, deleting to-dos, all of that good stuff. So that's the plan for today. And you can see it's pretty basic. It's not that complex. But the main idea here is to demonstrate TypeScript usage with Vue.js. So for example, if you look at our home view, which does the listing of all the things, let's format this a little bit better so you can see it. So I guess actually if we format with prettier, if we do ESLint fix all auto-fixable problems, it puts it all on one line. I guess this is a little bit better. Okay, but use query comes from a library called vue-query, which is exactly the same as what you have in the React world with React query, but it works with Vue.js. And then you can see the TypeScript happening here. So basically we're saying that this query will respond with an array of to-dos with a given ID. And if it throws an error, it will throw an error of type API error. So there's TypeScript there. And then what's nice about that, using the latest Vue tooling inside of my template, I also get really nice type checking, type information, and autocomplete. So you can see here that this response is of type Axios response. We can see data is of type error response. We can see that data is an array of to-do with ID, and then each to-do is a to-do with ID, and then they have an ID property and also like a content property. So lots of TypeScript happening here. And then we also have our API client, which we'll eventually, we need to do a little refactoring, but eventually this is going to look exactly like the API client that we had for the React app, because it's all HTTP request code. There's nothing React or Vue specific in here, but ultimately we're calling this method from within our homepage here. That's pretty much all we set up. I mean, the other setup was getting our material design components from a library called Quasar. So that's the other thing we did in the last episode, is we actually spent probably 30 minutes to an hour just deciding what component library would we use, because we were going to use one, just didn't know what to use. And the most popular choice in the Vue world is typically Vuetify, but Vuetify does not yet have a stable release that supports version 3 of Vue, because about a little over a year ago, Vue got upgraded to Vue 3. They changed a few internal things, and so libraries like Vuetify would need to update themselves. And so technically it's still in beta, so we didn't choose Vuetify, ultimately because it's in beta. We had some other options. There's like Prime Vue and stuff. And Marvin, thank you very much for that Prime. A few other things. And thanks for dropping in, Stas. Have a good one. But ultimately, we settled on Quasar because they do support Vue 3. And Quasar typically is for building cross-platform applications. Like, they have a way of building mobile apps with Capacitor and a way of building desktop apps with Electron, but they also just have material design components that you can use separate from all of that other cross-platform stuff. And that's basically what we're doing. We're using their material design components. And the Shivas, thank you very much for your daily gift. You gift at least one sub every single stream, and I appreciate it. It makes me very happy. Thank you so much. And also shouts out to Gordon Lee with the 4 months. Thank you for that resub before we got started. And then Limeouts, I don't know if I missed this resub on stream, but thank you for the 25 months as well. All kinds of supports. I appreciate you all. All of that to say, we're using Quasar. It's got material design components. We got all of that set up. And then again, there's this library called vue-query, which I actually haven't used before, but ultimately it is the exact same API as React query. And really, it's tan stack query, which is interesting because it does look like tan stack query is going to be making their own vue-query version soon. Coming soon, but it doesn't exist just yet. I'm curious if they're just going to fork this code base. I would think that they probably wouldn't, because they probably want to reuse some of the internals that are used like in React query, but I don't know. For now, we're using this library. Eventually, if TanStack query releases a Vue version, we likely could just swap it out without any changes because it does have the same API. Okay, that's the app. Today, we're going to create to-dos, update to-dos, and delete to-dos. Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for the bits, Jaffaran. Much appreciated. Yeah, and no worries to all the people that are on the opposite side of the world, where it's like midnight or 2 a.m. just watch the VOD on the archive channel. Right now is usually a pretty good time to stream for people that are in the United States, because they're either just getting off of work or just about to have dinner. It's like the evening-ish, early evening to late evening. So for people in the US, this is typically a good time to tune in. Yeah, what time is it in the EU? Where are you at, Whiskey? Let's see. In the United Kingdom, it's 10 p.m. In Mumbai, India, it is 3 a.m. In Sydney, Australia, it's 7 a.m. Cute Pony says, I'm the worst enemy for your sleep schedule. Yeah. So in Europe, it's bedtime. For all you people over there in Europe, on that side of the world, it's bedtime. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to say hi to everybody, and then we'll get to coding. Because I got a hot date tonight. I got to be done at a specific time, so I got to make sure to get going. And I'm not even worried. Like, working with Vue.js is just so much fun, and it's just so easy. You write less code, and things just work. So this app is going to be pretty easy to build. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's my fiance. We've been together for years at this point, but we don't normally go out, so we're going out tonight. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and thank you, Marvin. Much appreciated for that Prime. From you're over in Germany. That's awesome. Okay, let's say hi to everybody. If you'd like me to say hello to you, you can say hi, hello, hello, hey, yo, cheers, greetings, hi, us up, what's up, morning, afternoon, evening, howdy, good day, coding hi-yo, vo-hi-yo, or boga hey. Say any one of these things, and I will acknowledge you. I will notice you. So what's up, SQL Gordster? Yeah, I forgot to update the Twitch schedule. So the schedule was correct on my website, on the Google Calendar, and Thiago, thank you very much for the sub. Is that your first sub? Yeah, first time. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. The schedule is always up to date here, but I forgot to sync the schedule with Twitch. So, apologies for that. Welcome in the She-Boss and Pub Blip. Hello, hello. What's up, Coding Garden fan? I feel like it's been a while. Thanks for tuning in. What's up, Burnt O Rice? And Ryan Roga. It seems like everything I do with TypeScript is like right in line with what you're doing with TypeScript. So I'm glad, Ryan. I'm glad that the stuff that I'm doing can help with what you're working on. What's up, Limeoats and iRossum and UXWeb and ArtBajan and Mark Boots and STKRE and Veritatas and Eddie and Whiskey and Silver Design and Tanner and Java Guy and Bash and America 2050 and Stas. What's up, Veeb and Mortalbox and Demand and Alka and Childa and Anabath and Abdil and King Assassin. What's up, Python and Chill and Cute Pony and Decallers and 0x Neo and Wasabi Dev and Marvin and Z3 or 73 Emo Sapien. What's up, Mushishi and Jifferam Bogahay. What's up, Grandpa's iPad? Bogahay to you. What's up, Fob? And Curried Lambda. Welcome in, everybody. Glad to have you. And Thiago, hello. Ever dabble with Nim or Rust? No, I haven't. Is Nim is that like a backend framework for Rust, or is that a separate thing? Nim versus Rust. Oh, it's a language. I feel like I've probably heard of it. Never used it. It's like Python, but it's a systems programming language. Just like looking at a glance, it kind of looks like Python. Interesting. So it's like Rust is for the people that are used to like C style syntax, but it's a systems programming language. And then Nim is maybe for people that are more used to like Python syntax. Interesting. I'll have to check out all this stuff eventually. Like, I just don't have the time, at least right now, anyways. And if you want to see all of the code that we're writing today, it's over on GitHub. There's a branch right now for the work in progress view. You can check it out there. When I'm done, it's going to be on the branch called examples. I'll push it there. What's up, Pablo? Welcome in. Yeah. Yes, that is a true statement, Wasabi Dev. There are a lot of languages and frameworks. I don't try to keep up. I use what I know, and then when what I know isn't working for me, I try to find a thing that will work for me. But that's how you stay sane in this industry. King Assassin is asking about C#. C# is more comparable to Java. The syntax is C style, so it looks kind of like C++. But C# is not as native as C++ code, because C++ code gets natively compiled for any given CPU architecture, whereas C#, and Mark Boots, thank you very much for the gift. I don't know if he did that on purpose, but that person got gifted. It was random. But C#, when you compile it, it gets compiled into what's known as intermediate language, and that intermediate language needs to run in the .NET runtime. And then the reason I compare it to Java is because Java code, once compiled into an intermediate language, runs on the Java virtual machine. So it was random. That's good. Even if it wasn't, it's fine. It's funny. So C# isn't as low level as like Rust or Nim in this case, but still very useful, used in a lot of enterprise and apps and stuff like that. Okay. I actually have to use the restroom. I was panicking to fix some Discord issues before the stream, so I'm going to run to the restroom. In the meantime, say hello to someone in chat. Pick someone in chat and compliment them. Give them a really nice compliment. I'll be right back. compliments. There was like 2 compliments in chat. What are you doing? There we go. Ryan with the compliment to the she-boss. I guess you don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot. There you go. Alka complimented themselves. No, I'm gonna disagree, American 2050. I think this is one of the nicest chats on Twitch. Even with like the random troll and stuff like that, you all are very nice, and I appreciate it. Oh, thank you, Nuts. Thank you for the compliment. And what's up, RWX Ganta? Welcome in. Okay. Oh yeah, and somebody made a comment about C# being able to be compiled elsewhere. But yeah, so C# usually runs with a runtime, although Unity has IL2 CPP tool that lets you generate C++ code, which gets compiled. Yeah, so if you're writing C# in Unity, the language is the same, but what happens with the compiled code is different than what typically happens with like a C# console app or ASP.NET app, in that they have a tool that actually will natively compile it. So that is a thing for sure. What's up, Pinchy? I'm doing good. All right, let's write some code. I'm going to pull up my to-do list because I don't think it's in the repo. I think I had it separate. Yeah. Let me find my to-do list real quick. So I've done some C# and .NET stuff in the past. I want to do so much. I want to do more streams with like .NET and more like native languages and stuff like that. I just haven't. Here it is. But yeah, I mean, ideally, yes. Ideally, there will be eventually streams that do that stuff. Okay, so this is what we did last time. We set up the project. We got our linter. We got all the styling and component library and vue-query and all of that set up. And then we created the find all route. I'll do a quick overview of the codebase. I know I already did that earlier, but more people have joined since I did that. So I'll do a quick overview of the codebase, and then we'll work on a form that will let the user create a new to-do. But let's start at the top. So in the folder here, a bunch of configs. We are using Vite as our build tool. Now, we didn't actually use Vite to scaffold this project. So if you looked at the Vite website, they have a way of generating a Vue template. This is not that. This is what's known as a create Vue app. It uses Vite under the hood, but it has a bunch of other setup automatically for you that you don't get with just a Vite app. And actually, I want to show you that really quick because it's kind of amazing. And I'm baffled that something like this doesn't exist in the React world. I mean, maybe it does, but regardless, if you look at the Vue.js website and go to get started, quick start, they'll show you the command you need to run. You do npm init at vue at latest, and this is going to run the create Vue app. And see you later, Moshiko. Thanks for dropping in. So you give it a name. Do you want TypeScript? Yes or no? Do you want to use JSX inside of your Vue app? Because that's a thing that you can do. Yes or no? Do you want to add Vue router to get client-side routing in a single-page application? Yes or no? Do you want Pina, which is the new replacement for Vuex? This would be comparable to like setting up Redux. Yes or no? Do you want to use vtest for testing? Sure. Do you want to use Cypress for end-to-end testing? Do you want to use ESLint for code quality? So wouldn't it be amazing if we could generate a a React app with all by answering all of these questions? Boom, done. So that's how easy it was to set up last time. And the only extra config we had to do was we wanted to add the Airbnb config TypeScript configuration to our ESLint. And on the Vue organization GitHub, they had an example repo with a bunch of different projects set up with ESLint, and we literally were able to just copy paste the config from there. So all of that to say, like, setting up this Vue app was so easy using the standard tool that comes from the Vue.js ecosystem. Okay, so that set up basically all of these configs, and then all we did was we went into this ESLint RC and we now extend from this existing config that gave us the Airbnb rules. So that's it for all the configs and setup. And then in terms of the app, we installed, like I mentioned earlier, this library called Quasar, which we are only using it for the material design components. It can do a lot of other things, but we're really just using the components. So we brought that in, we're using it, and then we're also using vue-query, which lets us make our API requests. The router was set up for us. We can go add new routes in here later on when we need new routes. Right now, we're not actually using the Pina store. And so this is how you define essentially like a global store inside of Vue.js. You give it a name. You have these things called refs for reactive values. There's other things like computed values. There's also things called reactive. But ultimately, you set all of that stuff up, return an object, and now you can use this object in any component throughout your app, and it is completely in sync, no matter where it's in use. That's a basic store in Vue, but we're not using it. We're just leaving the example in case we want to use it later, because using something like vue-query kind of handles all of that global state for us. Use query comes from this library called vue-query, which is basically an exact copy of React query, but for Vue. And basically what we say is, actually, I'm going to write it this way. What we say is, I have this query called findAll. So you give it a name, and then you pass it a function that will return a promise. Technically, this doesn't have to be an API request. It just so happens that most of the work we do in front-end stuff is an API request. So findAll returns a promise that will resolve to a data that it requested from an API. But the way useQuery works is you pass it something that resolves to a promise, and it handles all of the internal state that you typically have with things that are promises. So isLoading will tell you if the request is running behind the scenes. Error will give you back an error object if this promise threw an error. Data will be the actual resolved data. So typically, you'd have to set up all of these variables yourself. You'd have to set up all of the state management. vue-query handles all of that for you. So that's why we're really just using this, and we're not using the Pina store, because what's nice about this is behind the scenes it also does caching and shares the data. So if I had another component that needed to use this exact same data, I would just have the same useQuery code with the same ID, in this case findAll. And if one component already requested the data, the other component would just use that data. It wouldn't refetch the data. And what we're going to show today is there's actually a way to invalidate the cache. So whenever I create a new to-do, I want to invalidate the findAll cache, because when I go to the home page, I want to see the latest data that includes that to-do that I just created. So we'll show how to invalidate the cache today. So that's it for useQuery. We have a little progress bar here if it's loading. We have a little error banner if there was an error. And then if the data came back from the API, we loop over it and put the data into a card. And so that's what you see right now. It just says learn TypeScript on that. Yeah, so one of the first queries we're going to write today is a mutation that will create a to-do. That's pretty much it. Let's get to coding. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a create one page. So I guess technically this doesn't have to be a page. I will create a component for it though. So I'm going to create a component called to-do form. And this will have the form that will create the to-do. And like when they click save or click add, that'll create it. It'll call the API, invalidate the cache, and then the list below it will refresh. I think I have some autocomplete in here. I don't know all of my Vue tooling from off the top of my head. But for now, I'm just going to add a little form and an input. But all of this is going to change because I need to go look at the Quasar docs to see what they use for like text fields and stuff like that. So I have a form with an input. I can have a script. In this case, I'll say the language is TypeScript. If I left that off, I could just use JavaScript without any type checking. And then we can see how we set it up in home view. essentially we need to put this setup keyword. So this is new in Vue 3. And this is also a shorthand for what actually is happening behind the scenes. Because when you put that setup keyword on there, what it actually does is it exports an object that has a setup function with all of your code inside of it. But instead of having to do all of this boilerplate, I literally just put the word setup right here, and then now all of the code inside of the script tag is essentially inside of that setup function. Cool. And then we will need a ref for our input value. And so we import that from Vue. Now, if you are familiar with ref in React, this is similar, but actually different. Ultimately, ref is kind of like use state in React. But in Vue, we have a ref. And then, for instance, I could have, let's call this like new to do. I would create a ref that starts as an empty string. So this is kind of like use state with the empty string. And then I can use this in my app. Yeah, Vue is really cool. Yeah, so refs in React let you get access to native DOM elements. So if you wanted to actually get access to the DOM element that, like, let's say I wanted to get access to the DOM element that is this form, that's what you'd use a ref for in React. Technically, I think we can use this ref for that as well in Vue, but in Vue, this is also how we create reactive state. Yeah. But use ref is different than use state in React. Whereas in Vue, ref is just used for both of them. Regardless, let's go look at the Quasar docs because I want a form and I want some text inputs, and I'm sure that Quasar has stuff for that. So yeah, if we look at form components and like an input text field, this is basically what I want. A little field where I can say like learn Vue, something like that. So I think I'll just go with the standard one. We can look at the example code. And then I just need a Q input. So instead of an input, use a Q input. And then now, if I want to bind this input to this reactive value, I just use this vmodel directive. So this vmodel directive, I keep relating it back to React because I know there are a lot of React people in the chat. But vmodel is essentially adding a change listener and a state update all in one go. And then the label here will be new to do. Cool. So now we have this super basic form that someone can type into. Let's put it on the home page. So I want to put this form right below the error here. So I'm going to add the to do form like so. And that did an auto import from my components directory here. Like that. So now on the home page, I should see that little form right there. We're probably going to have to style it a little bit, but let's see what we get. It's not horrible. I definitely want to add a little bit of spacing, but we get that, and then I can do things like learn vue-query or something like that. So that's great. Let's adjust the styles. So on this form, Quasar gives us a bunch of utility classes. So this does like padding. So we get utility classes very similar to the kinds of utility classes that you get in Tailwind, but we can use them alongside. Yeah, so I did that. It gave us a little bit of padding, and now you can see there's like separation between the form and the actual list itself. Cool. You don't like that VF closing tags aren't visually obvious? Yeah. I mean, we can talk about all day how like the merits of like one template syntax versus another. Like I do like how simple it is to conditionally render an element. In React, it's technically simple because it's just JavaScript, but it's cumbersome because it's either a ternary statement or like the double ampersand, and there's extra curly braces and stuff like that. I actually think that's really cumbersome. This is nice, but like Ryan is saying, we don't actually know where the end of it is. In this case, the end of it is the other div. Like that's the end of the if here. Whereas if you compare this to Svelte's syntax, they actually have a closing if syntax. So then you know where the if statement ends. I don't know. This is turning into a comparison stream. I know we're just writing Vue, but there's a lot of people that don't use Vue. There's Qform, or I need to look at Quasar as well. form. The QForm API. Oh, you know what? They also has built-in validation too. That's actually kind of awesome. So we will definitely use that. Let's see the code. So yeah, QForm, we have a submit handler and then a reset handler. Looks good to me. So instead of a form, we'll have a QForm. Put this class on it. And then this is a QForm. Cool. Right now, we don't have these functions on submit or on reset, but we'll write them. But let's see what that does for us. Apparently, this class doesn't work the same way on QForm, so I probably, and in their example, they actually had a wrapper div, and they put that class on there. That also didn't do much. It looks like they also have, so they have Q padding medium and then Q gutter medium. Oh, I wanted this to be padding. That's why. What's going on here? Also, I'm way behind on chat. Sorry about that, everyone. Maybe it doesn't like me. Let's get rid of those for now and see if that fixes anything. QPAMD? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm messing up here. That's what we wanted. And in reality, if we put that here, which I think we got rid of, that should work directly on the form. Yeah, that works on the form. All right, we don't need a wrapper div. There we go. Okay, so we have ourselves a form. We have ourselves an input. What would it take for me to switch to Pug? I wouldn't mind working in Pug. So if you're not familiar with Pug, it's a templating language that is not at all verbose. So for instance, how do I see an example? Reference. This website is not a good example of what Pug can do. I mean, it used to be called Jade. The Jade website has a good example. Oh man, they lost their certificate. I want to show you what Pug is. I really do, but I can't find a good example. But Pug is think of it as it's a templating language. So instead of writing HTML, you write Pug template, which gets turned into HTML. It's the same website? Well, actually, they took me to getting started. Okay, we'll find it. We'll find it. Let me, language reference. Yeah, so for example, if you wanted to create an anchor tag with an href with the text Google, in Pug, you would write it this way. So this is a lot less verbose. There's less greater than and less than signs. And if you have multiple attributes, those get all put within parentheses. Let's look at this. So we have body with class auth. In this case, class can be like a ternary expression. Or you have an input with multiple attributes. In this case, it looks like that. So it's basically way less verbose than HTML, and then it could get turned into HTML. I would, honestly, the reason I don't use it is just so that because HTML is more familiar to people, like people watching anyways. Like if I were to use Pug, that's just one more thing to confuse beginners. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. I digress. Also, I didn't mention this at the beginning of the stream, but technically, this isn't a tutorial. Like, this is actually the first time that I'm building an app in this way. This is my first time using vue-query. This is my first time using Quasar components. I've built apps like this before, but this is my first time with a lot of these libraries. So you'll see me go into teacher mode, but This will not be edited for a YouTube video. I'm actually going to build the whole thing, and then in a future stream, I will build it again, but I'll be in teacher mode, and I'll make sure that I say things right and like do cuts and stuff like that. Today, I'm not doing that. It's just, it's stream of consciousness and also talking to Twitch chat. How do I keep myself updated? I just build things on the side. Yeah. Okay. We have ourselves a form. Technically, we have some state behind the scenes. So when we type into the input, we're actually saving that value somewhere. To show an example, if I just throw like an H2 right here, I can put the new to-do inside of it. And then now these two are bound. So you can see as I start typing, that thing updates. So that's what I mean when I say this V model right here is like a change listener and a state updater all in one. So that's what's happening. Behind the scenes, that variable is being updated. So now, yeah, we do want a submit. So when the form is submitted, we want to send the data to the API. For now, let's throw a little button on the form. Yeah, exactly. It's like ng model. So if a lot of the things in Vue were inspired by AngularJS. So that's Angular like 1.6. A lot of the directives were inspired by that. But behind the scenes, it actually uses a virtual DOM. And it's possible to use JSX inside of Vue if you really wanted to. Okay, so this should give us a nice little button. It does. I want to style that a little bit. So like technically, let's look at their example inputs. Do they have any classes on them? They don't. I want a little bit of spacing below the input, first of all. So let's add a class on there. I need to look at their utility classes because I don't know. I don't know them. I basically want to do like margin bottom spacing. Q gutter MD. Spacing? There we go. The page didn't load for some reason. Okay, Q-M dimension. So I would do Q padding and then A. What is the A? Q padding all medium. So if I do Q margin bottom medium, so that'll give us medium margin below the input like that. So basically I just wanted some space between the input. Okay. Step one. Step two is I want to put that button on the right. So actually I'm going to put this inside of a flex box. And I think there are some flex classes built into Quasar as well. So if we look at flex add-ons, can we use Tailwind? No, we don't need to. This Quasar has all the stuff we need. Obviously, I have to look at the docs, but I would have to look at the docs for Tailwind as well because I don't have Tailwind memorized. Okay. I need a row for flex. It might actually be a component too. Maybe this is in, yeah, layout and grid. Layout, grid row. Introduction of, yeah, so it is using Flexbox. And Mosdev, thank you very much for that sub. Yeah, I guess you're right. We technically could have Tailwind with the plugin, and then that would give us autocomplete. But it's fine. It's fine. We're not going to use Tailwind. We already have Quasar. So div class row gives us a flexbox. Yeah, and thank you for that. Is Rawazel. So class row, that makes it a flexbox, and then I want to do justify content flex end. So how do I do that? Justify end. That's it. We did it. Yeah, so that's the other. I apologize for all of that. Like, I mean, technically, I could turn on Dark Reader. I think I uninstalled Dark Reader. But yeah, that's the tricky thing. So I'm actually using, I didn't mention that, but I turned on, I'll show this really quick because it was actually really fun to figure out. We are using the dark mode of Quasar, which it has. For whatever reason, the docs don't let you turn on dark mode, but we also have a media query watcher and matcher. So when the page loads, if the user prefers dark mode based on their operating system or browser settings, we set Quasar to be dark mode. If they don't, we set it not to be dark mode. And then if that mode toggles, because some people turn it on at night, we'll detect that and automatically update the page as well. But yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that the docs don't have a dark mode. It blinds you every time I go to that page. And Stack the Pile, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome in, raiders. We are building a Vue app, and right now I'm trying not to blind you. So I'm installing Dark Reader so that that this doesn't blind you anymore. There we go. So now, well, it's tricky because sometimes this changes the colors of the page, and sometimes I care about the color. I don't know if we're gonna have to care about the color anymore, but for now, we'll use dark mode in the docs. All right, so we got ourselves a little flex box. We got a little button right here. Right now, we need to prevent the default action. You saw what happened there. I clicked it, and the entire page refreshes. So again, there's a nice little, not again, but there's a nice little built-in thing to do that inside of Vue.js. So if I do @submit.prevent, that will prevent the default action by default. And then I can point to a function, so like form submitted. And then in my script, if I define a function called form submitted, yeah, welcome in Moonstone and Sant. Yeah, what were you working on, Stack the Pile? You stream in Spanish. I unfortunately no hablo español. Yo hablo un poquito español. I only know enough Spanish to tell you that I don't know how to speak Spanish. Hopefully you can still follow though. Cool. So we can have a function here that will get called when the form is submitted and will automatically prevent the default action. So for now, let's just log the current value of new to do. So if I do new to do dot value, that'll give me whatever the user typed into the form. So if I say learn vue-query and click add to do, that function gets called and the value of that gets logged to the console. Great. Now we actually want to call the API. And so this is where a mutation comes into play. So inside of form submitted, we can do a little bit of validation. So I'll just say like if new to has a value, then we'll send it to the API. So we need to create a mutation. Let's look at the vue-query docs to see how they handle that. So we want mutations. The word mutation I first heard in reference to GraphQL. I don't know if it had a origin before that, but typically a mutation is something that's like not a GET request. It is a request that will modify something on the server. In that it's not just reading, it's potentially doing some creating or some writing. Oh, thank you, UX Web. No hablo español. I guess I know a little bit. My my mother speaks Spanish, but she never taught me. So, okay, so we want a nice little mutation. We can say use mutation, which gives us back all of this stuff. So first of all, let's import use mutation from vue-query, and then we'll use it. So we're going to get very similar to when we say when we said use query, we get back all of this internal state. So right here, I can say all of that is equal to use mutation, and then we need to pass in the thing that returns a promise. So in this case, I'll create a function in my API file called create1. I'll have to create that. But once I have it, that's basically the promise that's going to be called with the actual value. So over here in our lib API, we can define this actual create1 function. Apparently I stubbed it out before, but basically create1 will accept in a to-do, which is of type to-do. So we can import that from our types. I showed this last time. Some of you are going to be very surprised at what I'm doing here. But I am actually importing my types from my backend code. I'll show you that here. Now, I had to do a lot of TS ignoring and linting disabling, but because I am exporting just the type, I'm not exporting the value, I am allowed to do this. So I'm actually reaching into my backend code to get the interface that I defined already for to do and to do with ID. It's not illegal. It's not. So here's the thing to know. Because I am only importing the type, I'm not importing the value. When this code is built, all of the TypeScript gets stripped away anyways. So I'm really just importing the type definitions. I'm not importing the actual objects or anything like that. So that's how that's working. Now, of course, if you were using like TRPC or something like that, it supports that out of the box. You basically are importing your API router type from your backend code. Well, the better way to do this would be to have a mono repo and then have a separate project where all of my types are stored, and then I could share those types between projects. Right now, I'm not doing that. I'm basically just literally reaching in. Like, I also could I could copy paste these interfaces into this code base, but this allows me to reuse them for now. Yeah. Do I always have to export types? What if I created that? Would you not just have the access to the types that way? I'm not familiar enough with how that works in TypeScript. So if you do a types.d file, that's a definition file. And then does that make those types available in your entire code base? We could try that. So if I do types.d, and then if I just say import type, and then why is this complaining? Defined but never used. Yeah, so if I import those in, does that mean I just get access to them over here? Maybe not. I'm not going to mess with it. This code is working. This code is working. I'm going to put it back to the way I had it. I think maybe that file needs to be like at the root of my project, but for now it's fine. I don't mind importing them from there directly. Yeah, so this is already using a backend and a database. So you're going to see right here, we're actually going to make an API request to my backend. We're going to do a post to /todos. I expect to get back a single to-do with an ID, and I'm going to send this specific to-do here. So this API we wrote a month ago. So we already have the backend running, and it's talking to a MySQL, or sorry, it's talking to a Mongo database. Right now, we're just building the front end for it. So, oh yeah, and I missed something from Stack the Pile. Don't worry, your Spanish is great. I watch your videos. We're doing a game with the API of Twitch. It's an RPG. Oh, very nice, very nice. Yeah. And welcome in, Ambitions. But I can point you to that code. So, oh, I think, did Dark Reader load on here? Don't do that, Dark Reader. If you look at the repo for today's code, oh man, I thought I had it as a inverted, yeah, I want inverted list only. There we go. Go to the root of the project and switch to the main branch. Actually, I'll just link the code after we get, actually, no, you want to, go to the examples branch. The examples branch has an examples folder, and inside of there, we have the Express API. So if you look at my my YouTube channel, what is happening? What is happening? If you look at my YouTube channel, you can see from about a month ago, I did this build a CRUD API. So that's where we built the backend, but now we're building a front end for it. Okay, we're on our way. So we have this create one function. It's going to do a post request to my backend. I'm saying my backend will respond with a to-do that has an ID on it if it was successful. We're passing in the specific to-do that we're creating. Okay, so I've defined that function. Now over here, I need to import that function. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah, so import create one from lib API. Easy enough. I don't know why it did that. Cool. So now we have that, and then we have these variables that we can use. So I'm curious if a Quasar button has like a loading state. So we can make the button like not clickable and have like a little loading spinner on it. Let's see. Maybe if we look at progress or loader. Oh yeah, sorry. Back to that. So I want it to be an inverted list only. There we go. Oh yeah, so we have progress. Do they show an example on a button? Maybe not. Progress related. Indeterminate progress. Yeah, okay, that's what I want to see. Okay, so this first one, let's see how we do that. vslot loading? Oh, that's that one. That's the red one. Where's the one before that? Q button loading. Oh, okay. There's literally a loading property. So I can literally say loading is loading, like that. So when I click the button, loading will be true. I don't think that disables the button, so I want to disable the button too. No, it does. So if we're loading, the button will be disabled, and we'll see that loading spinner there. I think I want to disable the input if loading is true. Like that. So when we click create, the user can no longer type into the input. They can't click the button again until the whole thing is done. And then if it was successful, then we clear the form and invalidate the cache. Should be good to go there. I guess I technically also want to show an error. So let's copy this Q banner. So the banner with BG red gives us like a nice like error thing. So on the form, above the form, if there was an error creating, we want to show that here, like this. I probably should pull this out into its own component, but this is fine. And then now we can type this as well. Format, and then we can type this thing. So use mutation says what we're getting back. In this case, we are getting back a to-do with ID. And then we can also specify I believe the error type. And that gets rid of the type error here. So because I tell it what kind of error can be thrown, we now know that if error has a value, it is of type API error. And that way we can actually get the message if it was in the UI if it was thrown. That should do it. So now let's actually call this mutation. And there's two ways to do it. There's mutate. And so you can see the way I set this up. Now, mutate is a function that takes in a to-do with ID. So right here, if I say mutate, it should say specifically I believe it wants it to do test and then done false. Maybe not. Let's look at the docs. There might be a separate property we have to pass it into. Like that. I don't think I'm typing this right. And also, I want to do a mutate async so that I can reset the form whenever the mutation is done. I I'm going to look at the definition for use mutation because I just want to make sure that I'm getting the typings right. So data should be the data that it accepts. In this case, it accepts a to-do. So we're passing in just a to-do. It doesn't have an ID yet because it hasn't been created. And then the error should be of type API error. Okay, cool. And then this function takes in a to-do without an ID. So should be able to do that. Now, no overload matches this call. I guess the other thing is, do I need to define the return type? So we have t variables and then t context. Oh, this is the return type. Here, I'm going to throw this link in the chat. Somebody help me out. Like, what am I doing wrong here with the types? Like, I'm pretty sure I'm passing the types in correctly. But it's possible that, so like t data is the return type instead of the type of the variable that's being passed in. So thing is of type void. So maybe I have these wrong. So maybe this needs to be to do with ID, and then this needs to be to do. Now thing is of type thing. Okay. That was not immediately apparent to me that the first type is the return type, like the resolved value type, and then the third type is the type of the thing that I want to pass in. That was not apparent to me, but that's actually what it wanted. Because now if I do that, there's no error because this function takes in a to-do, and we've specified that type right there. Okay, good to go. And now this mutate doesn't throw an error. However, there should be a mutate async as well. Yeah, and that's what we want because when the mutation is done, I want to reset the form value. So here we'll do mutate async like that. We'll make this an async function. We'll await it. And then whenever it's done, we will reset the form. So I'll just say new to-do.value is the empty string like that. So when the form is submitted, make sure that we actually have a value in the form. I'm going to trim it just to remove any white space. Send it to the backend. In this case, content needs to actually be not test, but new to-do.value. It starts off as not done. And then when this is complete, we reset the form. Now, if this throws, does this throw an error possibly? Because if this throws an error, then we don't want to reset the form. So I kind of want to put this into a try-catch? I guess I don't really even need a try-catch, because if it throws an error, it won't make it to this line of code. Okay. And welcome in, Chai Tea Coder. Glad to have you. I'm trying to make a mail server with Node and Node Mailer. Everything's working fine. Also found a way to upload this on Versal. It's working pretty fine with post requests. When I add body to that request, it crashes on Versal. I have no idea how to help Mergen. You can post in our Discord, because there you can post like error logs and stuff. We might be able to help out. That's great. At this point, this will just work on the first try, maybe. But one last thing that we want to do is we want to invalidate the find all query when this is complete. So if you take a look at our home, so the home page, when the page loads, it finds all of the things from the API and lists them out. But when we create a new one, we need to say, hey, you should refetch. You should redo this. And that's why we need to invalidate find all. So I believe we can pass in options. At least we could in React query. Let's see if it's the same in vue query. There's like on success. Yeah, so on success, we can then say what we want to do. In this case, I want to invalidate a query. Is that in here? Let's look up invalidation in the docs. Queries, query function, dependent queries. Maybe they have an example in mutations, because typically you want to invalidate a query at the end of a mutation. So, yeah. Also, they're using like a weird font in their docs. It's really hard to read. What's up, Oscar? Welcome in. It's probably late at night for you. Oh, you're in Egypt? What's the current time in Egypt? Probably, I'm going to guess 3 a.m. It's 3 a.m. where you are, Oscar. Oh, it's only midnight. Cool, cool. Invalidate queries. Was it in the docs? I didn't see it. The query clients invalidate queries. So query client dot invalidate queries. Where are we using the query client? Okay, so, oh, did that just link us to, this just linked us to the TanStack query documentation. That's funny. Okay. Where, I think we defined the query client at the root level. So use query provider, does this return a query client? Yeah. Type void, never mind, never mind. Is there a use query client? There is. Do I need to do anything special, or do I just use it? So do I say query client is use query client? Like that? Seems fine. And then right here, query client dot invalidate queries. And in this case, I want to invalidate the find all query. Vue.js typically is for building front ends, yes, but there is a framework called Nux that will let you do server-side rendering with Vue.js. Very similar how in Next.js you can essentially do server-side rendering with React. So yeah, it's for building front ends, but technically you can use it on a back end with Nux. All right, this is going to work on the first try. Let's review. Let's review what's going to happen here. So, when the form is submitted, we make sure that the user actually typed something in. If they did type something in, we fire off this mutation. This mutation will ultimately resolve to a to-do with ID. We don't have to worry about that here because we're going to invalidate the query, and then the home page should refresh the list. And when we call mutate async, it's going to call create1, which we defined in our API file here. Which is just a post request. For now, I'm going to do a little refactor so that basically last time I added this little, basically like a sleep method, so that we can actually see the loading happening. I want to do the same thing here. For now, I'm just going to copy paste it, but in a second, I'll refactor this into like an extract data function so we can use it in multiple places. If there was an error, we show it on the form. When the form is submitted, we call that. When the form is loading, we disable the input and disable the, or show loading on the button. It's going to work first try. Let's try it out. So now the page loads. And I think actually I want to, on the home page, I want to make sure that the form is actually above the loading spinner. Like this. But then the error for the data should be above that. So we throw the form here, put the error above that. Do I want to, yeah, well, let's do it. So yeah, so now I want to see loading there because then that shows the info. But let's do a prediction. Will it work on the first try? I think it's going to work. Though I haven't gotten one of these right in a very long time. It's been a while since we had an actual first try, but you can bet with your channel points. Do you think this will work on the first try without errors? Essentially what should happen is I'll type learn Vue, I'll click add, it'll be loading, and then after that, it'll show up in the list below. Is this going to work? That's my opinion on Next. It's cool. It introduces a lot of opinions, which I like, because React is alone very unopinionated, and it does a lot of work for you, or like it has stuff set up for you that you don't get with just a basic React app. So Next is cool. All right, first try. Add. It's loading. Technically that didn't get disabled. And it showed there. So it worked. there were no errors. There were no errors. There's a couple of UI bugs we want to fix. Like, we want to make sure that that input actually does get disabled. And then the other thing is I want to make sure that the loading spinner shows when it's refetching, because we invalidated the query. So I know how to make sure that we show the loading spinner. The issue is, for whatever reason, I actually don't like this. My thoughts are with you, Acid Spark. Hopefully you either evacuated or you're in a spot that will not see much damage from the hurricane. Hopefully it's just power out and that's it. That's all you got to deal with. Okay. Is loading, for whatever reason, only is set to true on the first time. Whenever this query is invalidated, is loading doesn't get set back to true again. Yeah, I would say that worked on the first try. Absolutely. So there's little UI bugs, but that's not what we were saying. We were saying, will it work on the first try? Yes, it will. There you go. No, I said, will it work without errors? And there were no errors. There were just UI bugs. But I know that there's also this other property called isFetching, and that's actually the one that we care about. So instead of isLoading, I actually want to use isFetching for the list that's below. So now when I add something and then I invalidate the cache, we should see the loading spinner there. So if I say like learn vue-query, that will first loading here, then loading here, then we see learn vue-query. So that's better. So yeah, I don't know why React Query and vue-query work this way. Like, I would think that isLoading should get reset, but for whatever reason, loading is only true on the first load, not on loads after that. The second spinner should be at the bottom. I'm not opposed to that either, because now it will show below the list. Well, no, because in a second we're gonna make it so that the more recent ones appear at the top of the list. But yeah, it isn't a good UI pattern that it shifts everything down whenever it is loading. It would probably be better if it was like an overlay. But yeah, okay. The other bug I want to fix is this input doesn't get disabled for some reason. So yeah, I'll show you what useQuery is doing. So useQuery, I pass it this function called findAll. If we look at the findAll function, findAll is making an API request to this backend at this route. So when the page loads, it makes a request to our Express backend. Our Express backend looks in the database, pulls out the data, responds with it, and then we have that data in the front end. Yeah. So this data is that data we get back from that API request. Okay, how do I disable an input? Disabled apparently didn't work. Oh, is it enabled? Read only? Disable. There we go. Let's see how they did that. Oh, it's not disabled, it's disable without the D. That should do it though. So I don't know why that was loading, but if I say learn Spanish. Now, yeah, so that's disabled. I can't click on it. I can't click this button. But then when it's done, the form clears, and then we see it here. Awesome. It's happening. It's happening. The other thing I want to do, though, is I want to reverse this list so that the most recently created ones... Is it refetching on focus? It looked like it did. I think that might just be a hot reloading bug. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah, it shouldn't refetch on focus. I think it's because of how it does, how Vite does like the hot module reloading. For whatever reason, it set the loading state. Yeah, and also, I actually want to disable the button if new to do does not have a value. So, isn't it disabled? How? Depends on the component. What's the HTML way of doing it? I like what you're saying, Oscar. Yeah, so instead of this circle, let's just do a line. Yeah, so that's why I would think this would be that. Okay, so what is this complaining about? Oh, it just wants me to reformat it. So, yeah, this is what I want. So basically the button is disabled until I start typing. Do I actually have to do .value here? That's really weird to me. Oh, not new to do. So if new to do does not have a value, then it's disabled. That's what I wanted. Yeah, that's what I want. So now if I start typing, it enables the button, but otherwise, if I have nothing, then I can't click the button. That's what I wanted. So not new to do. All right, let's look in the Quasar docs to see if there is a linear progress. Q linear progress. Hey, that's what I like to see. Just like that. Cool. And I'm going to change that on the home page. So now the home page, instead of this Q circular progress, we get a Q linear progress. That's slick. I like that way better. Yeah, we could check the length. In this case, just checking if it has a value, I think is good enough. Okay. We can create new to-dos. Our form, and just like put it, you're saying put it at the top of the page. Also, if I did this, then there wouldn't be a UI shift. But if I put it on the linear progress itself. Yeah. And then if the form, does the form have like padding bottom? I could remove that. Padding all medium. Really, I want margin top medium. Yes. This is the UI we were looking for. So now, when we add new things, so like there's this spacing here, but that's fine. That's where the loading lives if there's a new thing. So if I say like learn German, now the UI doesn't shift. It just shows that and then appears at the bottom. Yeah. Yeah. And for this simple app, there's only one input. We're not going to have multiple inputs. If we had multiple inputs and this was a more complex form, we would probably use either a validation library, or if we look at Quasar, I think they do have a way of doing validations. Like it's like built in. Yeah. Validation. There's a rules property, and then you can actually like validate the inputs with this. But we're not going to do that. Okay. What do I do now? What do I do now? I think now we'll reverse the list. So basically what I want is this list. This list comes back from the API in created order, but I want the most recently created one at the top. And we can do that with I forget what they call it. Is it a transform or a... let's see. So there's a transpose map. Computed sort. I guess that's true asset spark. I guess if we put a div inside of here, I mean there's definitely a CSS way of doing this, but check it out. Basically, we're gonna swap one div for another. Oh, is it called select? Why not v-else? Because I don't know how to program. There is you're right, there is a slight UI shift. Oh, yeah, so we talked about this when we were building the React app. The reason I don't want to use display flex reverse is because that is not accessible. So a screen reader would still see the data in this order, which is why we don't want to do it with just CSS. If we flip it using, maybe it's called select, then that's more accessible. Select. Yeah, and so you can see here data is an array of to do with ID, and I'm just going to return data.slice, so that makes a copy of it, and then we reverse the copy, like that. Why is this complaining? Data is already declared on an upper scope. Oh, we'll call this to-dos. Cool. I know you could also, instead of using the slice thing, you could spread it into a new array. Ultimately, I don't want to reverse the internal one. I want to reverse the a copy of it. I like this better because I know that makes a copy. So that now will reverse the list, because whenever we get data back, it runs this selector method to do some modifications on it. Constant height on the div, yeah, you're totally right. Let's see if Quasar has a, I guess I closed the Quasar docs. Yeah, we technically could use a computed property. Yeah, we could have a computed property called reversed list. Absolutely. This is just built into vue-query, which is why I'm using it. But yeah, technically we could, and I'll show how that works, because it's be pretty simple. So import computed from Vue itself, and then we could have a computed property called like reversed list, and this would just do this, but it wouldn't be to-dos. We'd do something like if data has a value, then return data .slice.reverse, otherwise return data, like that. Data.value? Data.value. It's a ref, apparently. Otherwise, we return an empty array. So if we got the data back from the API, reverse it. Otherwise, return an empty array. And then I could use this property called reversed list inside of my... I could use it right here instead of just data. But the nice thing about this is I don't, for one, I don't have to be explicit like in React. I don't have to put like a dependency array of like the fact that this depends on data. I can just write it. It knows that this function should be rerun if its dependencies change. So yeah, this would be the Vue way of doing it. But because we're using vue-query, I'm just going to use their selector function. Yeah. That's what we're going to do next, hacks. We're going to put a static height. But I want to find a, let's see if there's a height class that we could use. Or I could just, I could just style it. I guess let's just style it. Because I haven't even showed like custom CSS in Vue. So you're in Vue, you want to add custom CSS for just this component. Put a style tag on there and say scoped. Now any styles inside this tag only get applied to this, or only available to this one component. And then if I create a class called loading and say height is, I don't know, 25 pixels. Now I can use this class on here. And now that div will have a static height. The other cool thing you can do is if I do lang equals SCSS, now I can use Sass inside of here. I think I'd have to install Sass as a dependency, but that instantly lets me use Sass as my templating language. But now, this is what everybody was complaining about. It now has a fixed height. so learn Sass. There you go. Show instead of if, so it uses, oh, you're totally right. Yeah, that's honestly, that's a better, well, yeah, that's a better way to do it. You learned how to do styles and classes with Vue just now, but everyone's totally right. vif literally removes the thing from the DOM. So vif, if this is false, it will not be rendered. Instead, if we use vshow, that sets the display, well, does it do visibility hidden, or just if it does display none, we're going to run into the same issue. Let's see. It does display none. You can see the shift. So technically, that element is still there, but right now it has a display none on it. Right there, you can see that it has display none because of that vshow. So that doesn't work in this case because display none removes the height. In our case, we just we could set visibility to hidden. Somebody else mentioned that in the chat too. But having a fixed height on the parent is totally fine. Totally fine. Oh, we could set the opacity too. Now that's some like nice UI tricks. Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. We can show a style binding too. See that? So this is. I'll make a quick observation of our coding right now. Because everything kind of just works, we don't have to struggle, and we don't have to write a lot of code, we can spend more time on a good UI, like disabling buttons and like making sure the UI doesn't shift, and then making sure we do like, I think in the React app that we built, we didn't even have this much user experience done here. But yeah, now we could do a style binding on this thing. Like this, and say opacity is in relation to is fetching. So if is fetching is true, then we want the opacity to be 1. If it's not true, we want the opacity to be 0. And then we could put a transition duration on here. 500 milliseconds. So now that, look at that loading spinner will fade. Well. Then we don't want the VF anymore because we wanted to do that. So look at that. Oh, that's beautiful. Whew, nice. Any quick notes for why someone might prefer Vue over React? Oh yeah, I mean, really, if you just watch me coding, I mention it every now and then, but there's all these quality of life things that just don't exist in React. So, for instance, on the form, when you're dealing with form submission, you always want to prevent the default action. Like, that's something you do all the time when you're working with React and forms, and really when you're working even with vanilla JavaScript. In Vue, this is built in, so I just do .prevent, and then now I don't have to do prevent default. It's just built in. The other thing is binding inputs. So In React, I have to explicitly add a change listener, and then I need to add a function that updates my state. In Vue, we just have vModel. This does all of that work for me, so it's less code to write. The other thing I like about Vue is that things are mutable. Now, some functional reactive programmers don't like this, but the fact that I can just directly modify my state variables without having to call like use set state is really nice. Like set state is a lot of times very cumbersome, especially when you're dealing with like deeply nested updates. In Vue, you can just directly modify it and it can detect that change. You don't have to have immutable data. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna rewind and look at the chat. What if the loading shows up at the same location the new to-do will show like a placeholder? I see what you're saying, but it's a little too complicated. I see what you're saying. Like, it could actually be a card that is loading, and then when the new one shows up, that card disappears and it becomes the actual text content of the new thing. Yeah. Oh, you can create a custom directive called visible that binds the visibility. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. What is accessibility with opacity? I don't know, but it is something to think about. I think technically, like, I don't have any ARIA labels on this, and like the loading spinner doesn't have any alt text or anything. So like, this actually wouldn't even show up for a screen reader, but that's a good thing to think about. Like, if you're only setting the opacity and not the visibility or display property, you could run into an accessibility issue. Yeah. 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 Yeah, dot value isn't the best, but, and I didn't talk about why we have to do dot value, but it's because this is a state variable wrapping a primitive value. So, in JavaScript, strings are actually immutable. You cannot change a string. You can create a new string and assign that new string to a variable, but once a string is created, you cannot change it. And so if we didn't have this dot value thing, then it actually wouldn't be possible to change the value. So ref essentially creates an object wrapper where value has a thing, and then there's a bunch of other like meta properties, and then we're able to change this because it's a property on an object. So like that's why we have to do dot value, and it doesn't bother me. I think it's fine. As of April 2017, the Chromevox screen reader does not read content that is set to opacity. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. And then so if you're familiar with Svelte, then it gets even simpler because it's just like, oh, you want a variable? Just create one and we'll make it reactive for you. You don't have to explicitly make it reactive. So yeah. Okay, this is fun. I'm having fun. Coding in Vue.js is so fun. Do we lose focus when we submit the form? Let's see. Do we lose focus? Enter. We do. I don't like that. Technically, we could get a ref to this input and then focus it on success. Yeah, you're totally right, though. But like, that's not nice because if somebody wants to create a lot of them really quick, in this case, you have to wait 2 seconds because of how we wrote the API. But now the input isn't focused anymore. Is there... Yeah, I agree with that, Robin. It does make it a bit more explicit that, yes, this is specifically a reactive wrapper. Is there a way to focus an input with like a directive? On focus? Autofocus? Is the form focused when the page loads? I think autofocus will focus it when the page loads. So, like that. Cool. Autofocus is bad accessibility. I didn't think about that. For this specific app, I don't think it is, because for this specific app, that's the thing that you want to be doing. If this were an app with a lot more going on, then I think autofocus wouldn't make sense, because there might be other things that they want to do. Yeah. All right. What time is it? I am not going to worry about the form losing focus. Though, why does it lose focus? Is it because we set it to the empty string? No, I guess it's because when we click enter, like technically we're clicking away from the field. Yeah. Oh, that skip to content thing? Yeah, WebDev Simplified did a video on it. All right. I'm not going to worry about focusing it. I'm also going to remove that autofocus thing. let's get to coding. We can worry about like little intricacies of the UI. Input field.value.focus. I would need a ref at that point. I would need a ref to the input to be able to focus it, but I'm not going to worry about it. At this point, let's create an edit page. So on all of these cards, I also think I want some spacing on the cards as well, but let's check a box. So we can now create a new to-do. Great. We'll create a page that shows the to-do, like an edit page. But before I do that, on the home page, let's add a little bit of styling. So on this card, we'll do a Q margin bottom 1. So that'll add a little bit of margin below every card, or should anyways. In this case, small, not 1, small. Yeah, like that. I like that. That looks way better. No, I'm not late for dinner. I still got like an hour-ish. So that looks awesome. Now, at the bottom of every card, I want to have a button that says edit. And when I click that button, it'll go to a separate page specifically for that one to do. Let's look at Quasar. And if we look at their card component, do they have a way of, yeah, card actions. Like this. Cue card actions with a button. So on this little card here, we've got our cue card actions. We've got a button that will say edit. And when we click that button, it'll go specifically to the page for that one to do. Now, I know we technically could do the editing in line, but the way I'm showing this is a pattern you could follow for a more complex application. So right now, again, it's super simple. There's only one field on these to-dos, but this could be a form for creating your favorite beers, or a list of your places you want to visit, or a list of videos you want to watch. And then the edit page could be much more complex. It could have a lot more stuff. Again, in our case, it's just a single value, or a single value that we're changing. And also there's a done property, but you could follow this pattern with much more complex data as well. Yeah, products, orders, and all of that. And the more complex a thing gets, the harder it is to be able to modify it in line. So we'll do that. Okay. Do I just put primary on here? I don't. How do I make a primary button? Color primary. We're using a library called Quasar, which implements material design. Okay, again, I want to put that button on the far right, so we'll put it in a flexbox. Class row, justify end. Nope. Let's remember how we did that. Oh no, class row, justify end. I did that right. Oh. This doesn't take up the full width. I'm curious if there's like a width helper in Quasar. Spacing? This is not Tailwind. It's not Tailwind. Quasar utils, style and identity. Technically, yeah, you're right, Mansfield. This is actually a perfect use case for floats, but I never want to use a float ever again in my whole life. So I'm not going to use a float. I guess technically, can I put this class on the card actions? Like this? Let's see if that changes it. Yeah, that's what we want. Cool. And then now when I click this edit button, I want to go specifically to a page for one specific to-do. So let's set that up. First of all, let's create the page. So in views, I'm going to create a file called to-do view.view. I don't like that it's view.view. We could call these pages, but it's fine. I'll call it to-do view. We'll have a template. For now, it'll just say to-do page, like that. And then I want to be able to link to it. So I need to set up a route for that. So in the router folder, you can see where the routes are set up. Right now, there's just one route for the home page. I want to add another route that's something like slash to-dos slash edit slash some ID, like that. We're going to call this the to-do view. And we're specifically going to, actually, we'll just call it to-do. And then we will import the to-do view component. To-do view for you, Stu. Ooh. You don't like that? Oh, because we imported it twice. This should be to-do view. Cool. So now we have a new route that's slash to-dos slash edit slash ID. Great. When I click the button, I want to go there for the ID of the specific to-do that I clicked on. So this, I actually want to be a router link. I don't know how to do that with Quasar. For now, I'm just going to put a link inside of a button, but in a second, we'll figure out how to make this link a button all in one. But I want a router link that goes to the to-do page. So I really like Vue.js as router, like compared to React router, because you can go to views based on their name. So, for instance, the name of this path, or the name of this route is called to-do, so I can say, hey, go to the one with the name to-do. But in this case, I have params, so I can pass in an object that has multiple stuffs inside of it. So I can say the name of the route I want to go to is called to-do, and then the params that I want to pass in, the ID is equal to this to-do dot underscore ID, like that. And so this says, and this will create a link that goes to the to-do page by passing in that specific ID. So if I save this and we hover over it, you can see it's pretty ugly right now. I want to fix that. But right now, if you look in the bottom left, it says slash to-dos slash edit, and then the ID of that specific to-do, like that. Cool. Let's look at the Quasar docs for buttons to see, is there a way to make a button a link, a router link? Is the ID a string? It is, but based on the TypeScript type that I'm using, ID is technically an object ID. It's not, though, but because I'm reusing the type from the backend, that's why I have to do that for TypeScript to be happy. So, yeah. Are manual routers still a good thing to use, or would you go with something based on folders? Folders will only get you so far, and for like nested routing in pages, not nested, but like if you think about the Dino app that we're building, we have dashboard, then we have dashboard list, and then dashboard list create. Each one of those is nested, but it is its own standalone page. Sometimes you want routing that is not an entire page, but just like one small section within a page. And routing like this is really good at that. So you actually can create subroutes that will load on a given route. With file-based routing, and I don't know how you would do that. There typically is a way. Let's see if they have, if they say anything about router link. Here. Replace props. Make sure that you also inject view router in your project. Handling navigation. Here. Oh! You can literally just put a to prop on the button. That's easy. So let's take this entire prop and then put it on the button. Okay. And now the button still works. Nice. Nice. Cool. Cool. Cool, 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 cool. And what's up, Daniel? Welcome in. Glad to have you. I'm less and less stoked about file-based routing, but to be fair, I'm not up there. That's fine. I mean, it really comes down to preferences at the end of the day. Cool. I'm going to make this title up at the top here. I'm going to make that link back to the home page. So if we look in the app component, I think that's where we set up the nav bar here. And I actually want this to go to the home page. Here, I should be able to just say to home. Or not. /. Yeah. I guess I technically could do to name home. Like that. And I'll say the reason that I like this is because if I'm navigating based on the name of the route, later on, if I decide to change the actual path that's displayed, I don't have to update my code in a bunch of places because it's just referencing the name of that route. So this should technically work. Yeah, so that takes me to the homepage like that. All right, I want to remove the... maybe I just make it a button. Yeah, I like that better. There we go, because now if I'm here, I hover, I know that I can go back to the home page. I more often change the name than the path. Yeah. I believe it, Time. I've never run an accessibility test, or even like Lighthouse on my Coding Garden website, but I'm about to totally rewrite it and revamp it. Why is the loading flashing on page load? It's because of hot module reloading. So like anytime a file is like changed in here, then actually no, that's actually a... Thank you for bringing that up. That is actually a setting of vue-query. On page focus, it refetches the data. So if I'm here and then I refocus the page, yeah, somebody mentioned it earlier and I glossed over it, but that's actually a setting that we can specify. So here in our app, one of the defaults we got rid of was retries. Retries are really nice in the real world because like if an API request fails, vue-query will automatically re-request if it fails. But there's also a something on focus. But yeah, Cute Pony told me it was happening. I want to get rid of that. Window focus refetching. Refetch on window focus, false. Yeah, so if I disable that, now on refocus, it doesn't refetch. which is better, because otherwise that's gonna like ping our API a bunch. Okay, cool. All right, now we want to be able to get one specific to do. So when I go to this page, so to-do/edit/ID, this needs to make an API request to actually load that to do into this page. So let's work on that. So first of all, let's create the API method. So if I go to our lib and I go to API, I want a function called find one. It's going to look like this. So find one. I want to take in an ID, which is a string, and then I want to pass that ID in here. So if I go to /todos/some ID, and I make a GET request there, that should return a single to-do with ID. So to-do/ID should give me back a single to-do with ID. At this point, I'm going to do a little refactor because you can see a lot of repetition here. So I'm going to make a function called extract data of some type t. It accepts in basically an Axios promise, and this will be async. And then we want to grab the data from that promise and return that data. And then we can also now make this like that. And this promise will be something that resolves to a promise of type t. It will resolve to a Axios response of type t of a promise. I realize for anybody new to generics, this is really confusing. But what that now allows me to do is in find all, I can just say return extract data with api.getToDos, like this. And that should be fully typed. So now it knows that find all returns a promise that will resolve to the data property, which is to do with ID. So now I can do that here as well. Return extract data from this. What's the difference between CRUD on the front end and CRUD on the back end? I will show you right now. So CRUD on the back end is how we actually persist things. Meaning in this case, we're putting things into an actual database. So, I mean, I'm not showing this, but this is literally an Express server that is running and that is talking to a Mongo database. So anytime we send a post request, it's putting it into that Mongo database. So imagine this were a server hosted in the cloud or on like a serverless function or something like that. Like this thing is in charge of interacting with the database. The front end cannot directly get to that database. Like for one, it's not technically possible because there's no MongoDB driver for front-end code that can like run inside of a web browser. And for two, that would be a security nightmare if you had code running in a web browser that could directly access a database. So the front end, in this case, the only way it has access to that database is through the API. It has to make an HTTP request to the API. The API then does the hard work of reaching into the database and then responding to it. Yeah, and so in this case, this application is known as a decoupled application, in that this Vue.js application that's running right here is only client-side code. Like there is no backend running, and if I wanted to deploy this website, I could put it on a static file server or on a CDN. Basically, if you look at the network requests that happen, so when this page loads, you're going to see a few network requests. Like this pulls down some JavaScript, some CSS, but after that, the only requests that need to happen are API requests. So you can see that that was a request to get all of the to-dos. And then if I go here, we haven't added it yet, but that would be a request to get a single to-do. But if I go back to the home page, now that's a request to get all of the to-dos. So we are no longer requesting pages, we are only requesting data. And in my case, this is known as a decoupled application. Now, you're right, with Laravel, you can do that, but Laravel does server-side rendering. So Laravel is a back-end process running with PHP that can read from the database put that into a template, generate HTML, and then send HTML back to my front end. In this case, I am only dealing with JSON data from my backend. So if you look at these network requests, this request to get all of the to-dos is just responding with data, not HTML. So that it only responds with data, and then this client that I've built can represent that data in some way. So that's why I'm saying those things are completely separate, is because that's how we've built this. Now, I believe with Laravel you also can have actual client-side code that doesn't necessarily do server-side rendering, because I know Laravel lets you use Vue as well. But all of that to say, for the app we're building, our front end and back end are completely separate. Something's broken on GitHub? I actually don't even know what the repo is. Is this the repo? Yeah, this is the repo. The landing page is built with Svelte, and then all of the nested pages are just static things. Some of them have Vue, but they're all just static. Are you saying that this app isn't working when you try to run it locally? Is that what you're saying? And what is Livewire? Does that have to do with Laravel? Yeah, I'd never heard of it. I'm using backend only for routing. No, so like you are missing a lot of fundamental understanding to even get what's going on here in Matsview. So I'm going to point you to some other resources because this is a single page application in that once it gets loaded up, so if you look at the page here, once it gets loaded up, this div right here is dynamically added to and removed from using client-side JavaScript. So when I go to the edit page, you'll see that I don't have a full page refresh here. All of the DOM is staying exactly the same, but that's because JavaScript has kicked in and is dynamically changing what I'm seeing here. So even though it looks like I'm going to a separate page, I'm actually still on the same page, but the view that I see makes it look like I've gone to a separate page. So you can see here, like, there is no page refresh. And that is single page applications do. That's what single page applications do. And specifically, they use the web history API, which lets us use JavaScript to change what's shown in the URL. So like all of this navigation you're seeing on the client side is not server-side routing. This is all client-side routing that stays on the same page but dynamically changes what's displayed and dynamically changes the URL based on what I'm seeing here. So this is the concept of a single-page application, which is different from server-side routing, because if you look at my backend, that has separate routes which actually run custom backend code based on the route that I go to. So this is my backend, which is hosted on a different port, but if I want to go to the root of the API, that is one request. And then if I want to go to another route, to-dos, that's a separate request, and it completely loads that. But you can see my API only responds with JSON data. Technically, you could build a backend that instead of responding with JSON data, it responds with HTML that has the data embedded inside of it. And that's what you kind of get with Laravel server-side rendering. But again, there's a lot of concepts happening here. I would research single page applications, client side routing, and then like the comparison between client side routing and server side routing, and also server side rendering versus single page applications, because it's confusing. But once you get it, you just start doing it. Seems like GitHub in production has a different code base. Really? It should be the same. I don't think I've changed anything recently. Yeah. Okay. Now, here's what we want to do. When we go to this page, I want to load that single to do. I think I just worked on the API function. Yeah, so I have this function that calls my backend to get one single to do by ID. Now I want to use this function on the to-do view, the specific to-do page here. And for that, I'm going to need a script. And just like before, we'll say setup and set the language to Typescript. And I want to get access to that ID that's in the URL. And for that, I need use router. I need the actual router. I think this is what I want. Can I do like use route? Yeah, use route. That'll give me the specific route. So if I say this, now route should have a params property. And params should be an object with an ID property. So if we look at this, now when the page loads, I get access to an object that has that specific ID right here. And if I go back here and then I click another one, we get an object with some specific ID. Cool. All this to get a fraction of Dino Fresh's. Come on. We're doing some cool stuff here. Will you make it so the initial page request renders server side, or wouldn't it make sense for something? Oh, you would need something like Next.js for that. Like right now, the way I've scaffolded this app, it is purely client-side code. That like whenever I build this, it's just static files. There is no server-side process to even run this. This is all of this is client-side JavaScript. It would require, I mean, technically I would need to create like a server file, and then Vue, I think, does export some server-side rendering functions, but it's a whole process. I'm not doing that. This is a completely static application that I'm building here. Cool. So I have access to those params, which means I can use them. So what I want is something like this. I'm going to copy this use query, but it's going to be a little bit different right here. So first of all, we don't need a selector. And now instead of find all, I want to do find one. And in this case, I want to call find one with route.params.id. And then find one came from our API. We just defined that function that calls our backend. Cool. And I need to put some types on these params, because right now it doesn't know what that ID is. But this will respond with a single to-do with ID, and if it throws an error, it will be an API error. Cool. Now, use query comes from vue-query. Good. And then to-do with ID comes from our types, and API comes from there. Good to go. Now, let's see if we can type this thing. Can I say that like params is an ID that's a string? Is that possible? It's not templatable. It's not generic. And for whatever reason, ID is of type string or string array. Let's look at the Vue router docs. Is there an advantage of doing the application this way, doing it all client-side? It really comes down to yeah, so it comes down to like how you want to architect your application, how you want to deploy your application, and also how you want to develop on your application. Now, the one nice thing about and technically this doesn't even apply because you technically could do this with like Next.js, but here's the thing to think about. I wrote this backend with Express. It's talking to a Mongo database, and it responds with JSON data. It is essentially a JSON API. It doesn't adhere to the JSON API specification, but it's an API. It's a web API that responds with JSON. Any client can call this code. So, like a month ago, I built a React app that talked to this backend. Worked perfectly fine. This Vue app that I'm working on is a completely separate code base with a different framework, but it's now talking to the same backend. And then both of those apps can be completely static files. So when I build them and deploy them, they can live on a CDN, a content delivery network. so that when a user loads the website, it's going to be really fast for the initial page load because it's all just static content and static files. And then the actual interactivity would need to talk to that same API. So that's one benefit, is you can have multiple clients with a singular backend. In my case, it doesn't make as much sense because I'm just rebuilding the exact same client, but you technically could have a desktop app or a mobile app and they all talk to a separate backend. So there's that benefit. And then also the fact that I don't need a server to deploy this thing. Like, I don't need a Node.js process running to run this website. It literally, and I guess I'll show that because a lot of people aren't familiar with what you can do here. If I do npm run build, it is going to generate some static files. We'll see them listed out as well. There we go. So we've got, I've got some type errors I need to fix, but all of these assets here are everything required, and I guess including these two. So all of these assets here is everything required to run this app. I have a JavaScript file, a CSS file, an index, and then some fonts. That's everything. I can now take those static files and put them on any static file server. I could put them in Nginx, Apache. I could upload them to Vercel, and they could use their CDN. I could upload it to Netlify and use their CDN, but this is not backend code. It is completely client-side code, which means I also would have to pay less to host this thing. Like, I don't need a server that's running 24/7. I can literally put these files on a static server, and that would be able to serve it. And then also, if I deploy it to a CDN, I could benefit from the CDN, how fast the CDN is, and the fact that it has replicas around the world. Now, of course, the bottleneck is my API, right? Because wherever I deploy this, all of my clients are going to be talking to it, even if they are a static app. Like, this is the bottleneck because this does need a Node.js process. But that's really the main benefit, is the fact that I have these static files. I can put them on any static file server. I don't need to pay to run a server 24/7 that has Node.js on it. What are we doing? We are figuring out how to get route params typed. That's what we're doing right now. And then also, I think this has they should have the composition API. So like use route. Yeah, hopefully that helped at least. Like, obviously, it's going to depend on the type of app that you're building, and also like the one thing I haven't talked about is search engine optimization. So because this is all client-side JavaScript, potentially the initial page load will be slower because JavaScript has to kick in. Whereas if you had a server-side rendered app, the initial page load has all of the HTML and CSS and JavaScript and everything that you need. So the initial page load would potentially be faster, potentially get you better search rankings. So that's one thing to think about. But that's like a trade-off that you make. I've built a lot of apps where I don't have to care about search engine optimization because I've built like internal tooling, or I've talked about this in the past, but I worked at a software consultancy, and if the client cared about search engine optimization, typically they only cared about it for marketing and like their landing page. So we would actually build two separate websites. The first website would be like a WordPress app or even like a Gatsby app. And that would be marketing. It would be like selling their product and all of that good stuff. But then we'd have like a subdomain app.whatever the app is.com. And that would be the completely decoupled front end and back end. And hey, Austin Gill, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome in, raiders. We're writing some Vue.js. Right now, I am trying to figure out how to use generics on use route because I need to tell it what the type of params are. And I don't know how to do that. So I'm in the docs right now trying to figure that out. Yeah, welcome in, everybody. Glad to have you. Yeah, Vue is great. I love Vue. I love Vue. I love Vue. Does anybody know? Does anybody know how can I tell it what type these params are going to be? Yeah, so I'm going to stop talking about server-side rendering after this, but yes, so what Qpony is saying is correct. If I wanted server-side rendering, I would start with a framework like Nuxt.js, or Vite technically has a server-side rendering component, but they also, I think they point you to a project that does a lot more for you. I think it's called, is it Vavit? Or Vite plugin SSR? Oh, maybe it was vtext. It's not this. They changed their website if that's it. I mean, technically, if I just add this plugin, can I get server-side rendering? Maybe. I've never done it, but this kind of seems like that's the case. Like, technically, I could add this plugin and then my build would actually be a Node app that would server render my Vue app. Is it that easy? I don't know. I'm not going to do it, but that's something you could do. Okay. Oh yeah, and then I guess Quasar does server-side rendering too. We're using Quasar components, but we're not using the full Quasar framework. We're just using the components. All right. Did I get it? Did I get any help? Did I get a? No, I'm not going to do it because I need to be done with this app in less than 40 minutes. And we're almost there. We're working on the view. We'll get edit, and then we'll get delete. But the question is, how do I tell it what type params are going to be? Like in like React router, there's use params, and then you can pass in the type that say like ID is a string. But that doesn't work here. And from what I can tell, there is no there's no generic form of use route or use router. I mean, technically, I think this would be fine if I just did toString like that. Like, it's going to stop complaining. I kind of want to figure out how to type it, though. We'll just do this for now. This app is just it's a to-do app that has a backend. So instead of just a client-side to-do app, we're talking to an API. So, but we need to start it back up. A type for route and not just the params, maybe? Maybe? But basically, when the page loads, we get all of the to-dos from the backend. So that made an API request. We can add new ones, like this. That will make the API request and then invalidate the cache and then re-request the front end there. And then now what we're working on is we want to go to one specific item and we want to show its info and then edit it and also be able to delete it. That's fine though. Okay, so now that we have this, when this page loads, it should find that one specific to-do with that ID. Now, I think I can pass in an array for the type here. So if I pass in this, let's just say ID is that. The reason I would do this is later on I will want to invalidate this query. And so I want to invalidate it by ID because there could be some to-dos that I didn't modify, so I don't need to invalidate them. So I'm passing that in there. Is talking to an API different from talking directly to the server? So basically this is a server. I'm calling it an API because it is an application programming interface. There are various endpoints that expect certain types of requests and will respond in a specific way. So I've written it so that if I make a GET request to this URL, I will get back an array of to-dos, and it just gives me the data. It's not giving me a UI, it just gives me data. But this is it's technically a server. I'm talking to a server here, but I call it the API because it has specific endpoints. And then also, like, there's a single one. So if I pass in the URL an ID, then that gives me back just one that has that ID. So, yeah. Okay, what are we doing? We've got the data. Let's use it. But before we do that, I want to do a little refactor. So on the home page, we have these cards. So I'll show you here. So we have these cards. But I want this to be reusable so that I can show that same card on the single to-do page. So like this whole thing right here, I want it to be a component called like to-do item. So I'm going to create a new component called to-do item. And it will have a template that basically has that. Cool, and glad to hear it, OG Bobby. They're hiring someone who writes Vue. So if you write Vue, definitely reach out to them. And in this case, we don't want a v for it. We should have a prop called to do. And so I need to figure out how to define, actually, I think it's literally called define props. But basically now this is a component that just renders out a to do. And then I want to be able to use that right here. So I would actually just have like my to do item like this. And then I want to be able to pass down the to do like this. So repeat over my array of to-dos to give me a to-do item. I need the key because of the virtual DOM, and then I'm specifically passing down the to-do data as a prop called to-do. So now I need to figure out how can I tell the component that it should be expecting a prop called to-do that is of type to-do. So let's do that here. Got ourselves a script. We'll use that setup keyword and tell it that we want to use Typescript. And then I do believe there is a define props. Yeah, there's a define props function that I can pull in. And then if I just do define props and say I have a prop called to do that is of type to do, is define props a generic? Yeah. So this takes in a type. So I could define an interface called like to do item props, and this is an object that has a to do property that is of type to do with ID that I pull in from my types like this. I need to go look at the docs. I don't know quite what to do with this. And why is this complaining? Let's go look at the docs. Script setup, define prop. Oh, I literally need to create a variable called props, called define props. And then here I need to say to do, I guess I don't need a separate interface. I can just do this. And then I think there's a way to use a custom type. So I specifically need to import it because I'm using this setup syntax. I do know that. I think it's something like object as TypeScript only features. I'm gonna DuckDuckGo it. Vue 3 TypeScript define props custom interface. There's a prop type utility. This is an answer from February 9th. So I can say object as prop type to do with ID. Cool. And then now all of this becomes props.todo. Props.todo.content. Props.todo.id. And then this is just complaining because it requires a default value to be set. I think I can say required, require, true, and then required, and then the type is that, like that. Okay, we're on our way. And now prop type gets imported from vue. That took us a second to get there, but now we have props. And I didn't mention this for the raiders that came in and everyone, but this is not a tutorial. This is me figuring out TypeScript with Vue, and then eventually I'm gonna make a tutorial. Some of this stuff I already know, but like this is one of my first times doing that. I technically, like this app right here is Vue with TypeScript, and I wrote it, but I don't remember doing this. Regardless, this is great. Now, if we did that right, our home page should still look the same, but it doesn't. I think we're missing an import for that component. Yeah, so failed to resolve component to do item. We need to make sure that we're actually importing that in. So I'll say import to do item from to do item.vue. There we go. So awesome. We have that little component, but now I want it so that on this page we use that component as well. So let's do that. Now on the to do view, we'll import that component. And right here, I'll have the to do item. And I can say the to do is of type, or not is of type, but we're going to pass down data. And this is complaining because data is initially undefined. So I really only want to show this if data is defined, like that. I can use this version to make it simpler. Really? that seems great. But I still technically, if I want to make it required, would that still work? So if I do define props, pass in the type, to do is of type to do with ID. Wow. And then that makes it required because to do must exist on that interface. Like if I did this, then it's optional. Yeah, easy. Okay, let's put this into its own type though. To do item props. Oh no, no, I'll get this right. Type to do item props equals this. And then we can just pass that in like that. Cool. I like it. Thank you for that. Okay. And then we don't need that prop type thing anymore. Cool. So, seems good. Now, I do want to show loading inside of the to-do view, so we can look on the home view and copy what we've done there. So this has a div with loading inside of it. I also want to put this in another component because this actually depends on this style, so I don't want to copy paste all of that. So let's create a loading, let's call it linear loading. A linear loading component. So we'll have a template. We're going to pull this whole thing into there. So we'll now have a linear loading component like that. Like this. And then it will have a prop called isLoading. But then we also can pull those styles into here. Like that. Easy. And then we have a script. Type setup, language is TypeScript, and we'll say props is define props. But then we pass in a little type that says is loading is a Boolean. Now this will be props dot is loading, like that. Cool. And apparently we didn't even need to import define props. That's cool. Honestly, yeah, why would I even define a separate type when I can just do that? Yeah, okay. The code gets way easier. But now that I've pulled it into a separate component, I need to pass down is loading. And that should be is fetching. Like that. So now, if we go to the home page, that's this little piece right here. That's that component that we extracted out. It looks good. But now I want to use this on the specific to-do view. So right above the to-do item, if is fetching is true, we want to show that loading spinner. And so what that gives us is when we go to this page, oh, we need to import linear loading as well. So yeah, when the page loads, we see that it's loading, and then we get the actual content itself. And so like if I go back over here, we click on one like Learn View, we see that it's loading, and then we see the thing itself. Awesome. Love to see it. I guess technically I can show an error right above it as well. Like that. And so what that would do is if we get like a not found, then we see that error to do with that ID. And that's actually an API error. So it technically made an API request to my backend. And then my backend said, not found, because I don't know that ID. And so then we're just showing that error there. So that's nice. Awesome. Now, let's fix this. So right now on the home page, it makes sense that there is an edit button because that takes us to this page. But when we're on this page, I don't want an edit button. I actually want like a toggle done and a delete button. So let's modify our component to allow that. So on the to-do item component, these cue card actions here, actually this whole section, I want to be able to pass in depending on where I use the component. And so for this, I'm going to use a slot. Is it vslot? I'll have to look up the syntax for it. Slot? Like this? Is it vslot? And then what's it complaining about? Prefer self-closing. Cool. I think that's it. So now basically this component has defined a section that can be passed in from the parent. So on the home page where we have the to-do item, what we actually want is to throw this in there, and this should get rendered in that slot. So if we go to the home page, it didn't work. I think I have to put it inside of a vslot? I don't know. I should probably just look up the syntax. I forget how all of this works. vslot is not native. Is it just slot? It's just slot. Okay. And so I got to change it there, and then I got to change it over here. Slot. Property props was X. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I need to. This is now just to do. And see you later, Bug Breaker. Thanks for hanging out. Beautiful, beautiful. So on the home page, I'm specifically saying that we should have this edit button. And then on the to-do page, because we're not passing anything down there, now there are no buttons at all. But that allows me to then, specifically on the to-do view, I can define what I want that to look like. So have it like this. We can have our that, and I actually don't want justify end. I want justify, or I want space between. I want two buttons, one on each side. I think that'll work. But on the right side, I want a remove button. Is there a color danger? Actually, I don't know. Will I get autocomplete here? Color equals, I don't get autocomplete. But I want a remove button, and then I also want a toggle done button. This will be primary. Cool. Let's look at the Quasar docs and find out how we can get a red button. Primary, secondary. All right, shield your eyes. I'm going to turn off dark mode so that I get proper colors. I am not opposed to just passing a color. So like deep orange. Oh, I see the color that they're passing down. I guess I could technically just pass down red as the color, and then it will actually pick that up. Like that. That's fine. That's fine with me. Okay, also my space between didn't seem to work. It might be justify space between? Let's figure it out. We need to look in layout and grid. We need to look at Flexbox. Justify between, that's what I want. It's possible that they have a class that's, oh, whoa. I see, I did space between, it needs to be justify between. Cool. That's what I like to see, great. And so now we have this nice reusable component. When we're on the home page, it shows an edit button. But when we're on the single to-do page, it shows a toggle done button and a remove button. Cool, let's make those buttons work. So if we look at our to-do list, currently we can get one. So when we go to that page, we're showing one. Now let's do an update one. So I basically want to be able to click this button and toggle it as done. And for that, I need a mutation. So if we look back at our to-do form, we can see an example of a mutation. I'm just going to copy that. Because we want a mutation that will allow us to update the to-do instead of create a to-do. Right here on the to-do view, we're going to have ourselves a mutation. In this case, we're going to call update one. We can edit the text, but I've only got 10-ish minutes, so we're not going to do that. And also, I didn't make that work in the React app. You can only toggle it done. If you want to change the text, just delete it and make a new one. But now in my API, I need an update one function. And welcome in, Luigi. Yeah, no worries. Today was a somewhat quick one. I mean, the fact that I am building this same app in React took me 6 hours to build. We were only 2 hours and 40 minutes in, and I am almost done, which is crazy. I think this is a put. Yeah, it's a put, because you're replacing the thing at this specific ID. So you pass in a to-do, and then we're going to put that to-do at, we'll pass in an ID, which is a string, and then the specific to-do that you're, the replacement for the update. How long would it take me to do in Angular? Probably like 8 hours, just because I don't know Angular. I'd have to familiarize myself with everything. Yeah, this is the MacBook that's listed in Gear and also on my setup page. I think it's, yeah. If you look at that repo, that talks about my MacBook too. Cool. So now I have an update one function. I want to be able to call that here. So let's pull in update one instead. On success, we're actually going to invalidate find one with this specific ID. And wait, how did we get rid of find one? I guess I want both. I want find one and update one. Cool. In this case, I don't think I care about the error. We have is loading, which I'll rename to is updating. And this mutation takes in a to-do and responds with a to-do with ID. And then we're going to want to bring in the use query client here. You can check out the backend. Yeah, there. Yeah, that link. If you check out that Git repo, it has the backend in a folder called Express Typescript API. But it's an Express API talking to a Mongo database. Okay, we specifically want to invalidate the find one, so that way the page refreshes. And then technically, whenever we update an individual to-do, we also want to invalidate find all. Does this work? Can I pass in multiple here? Yeah, so we also want to invalidate find all, because if I update a single to-do, when I go back to the home page, I want that home page to refresh with the latest data because that to-do was updated. So by saying invalidate find all, it's going to invalidate the query from the home page. Okay, this should call update one, but it's going to call update one where ID is that given ID, and then the to-do, the content will remain the same. And done will be the opposite of what it currently is. Why is this complaining? Because data is possibly undefined. There we go. Okay. Is it data dot? Yeah, data dot value. Forgot about that. And then that. Whew. All right, we've done it. Yeah. So I could have done the question mark, but then it would pass it in as undefined, and then this would complain because it actually needs a value. So this says if we don't have the data yet, then don't even try updating, which you wouldn't be able to anyways because we wouldn't even show this update button that. Yeah, so Timon, you're going to need to create a fork, push to your fork, and then make a pull request. And then I should be able to merge those changes in. But yeah, so I don't allow direct pushing to any of my things. Yeah. Okay. That looks good to me. Why is this complaining? How do I do multiple? I mean, really, I want this one to be find one ID like that. Oh, not that. That? Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so that's one specific query that I'm invalidating, and that's another one that I'm invalidating, like that. Okay, so use mutation we need to pull in as well. And then why is this complaining? I don't understand this TypeScript error. No overload matches this call. So I'm specifically passing in the function that needs to get called whenever we are using a mutation. Mutation function. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. This takes in to do specifically, and then we pass it in like that. I think. Because to do is of type, yeah, content and done like that. Why is this complaining? Where else did we use a mutation? We used a mutation on the form. So create one is a function that takes in a to-do and resolves to a promise that is a to-do with that ID. Okay, so over here, this needs to just return it. Like that. There we go. Yeah, yeah. So before it was a function that returned undefined. Now it's a function that returns the promise. Okay, we're almost there. But basically, all we're doing is we're calling update one. But we need to do that whenever we click this button. So on toggle done, I'll say when this is clicked, I want to call a function called toggle done. And so then I can write a function toggle done that will do the business. So this will say mutate async. It's going to specifically call that mutation. This is where we want the data. So specifically, we want to pass in content is the current content. So we'll say data.content. And done is the opposite. So data.value.done. And this is where we will return if data.value is not a thing. Great. So when I click this toggle done button, it's going to call mutate async, which in turn calls update one with the current ID and that given to do. That'll make the API request to set done to the opposite of what it currently is. We then invalidate the cache and it should load the latest value. Cool. I have 6 minutes before I have to go. I think I can finish this in 6 minutes. So we click toggle done. I think technically I want this, is it disable? Actually, no, we have loading. Yeah, loading here is going to be if is updating. And then remove is going to be if is removing, which doesn't exist yet. We'll get that done in a second. And then lastly, on the to-do item itself, I want to actually display if it is done. So I'm just going to do that right here with a little checkbox. So if props.todo.done is true, then show a little checkbox. Otherwise, show nothing. Okay, moment of truth. Everything's broken. Or is it? Yeah, okay, so now if I click toggle done, it's loading, it invalidates the cache, and it doesn't refresh. It should refresh. Let's double check that. So this invalidate here didn't seem to work. Like the find one with that given ID. What I'm expecting is because this invalidates it, it should re-request it with the latest value. Toggle done. Loading. My invalidation is not doing what I expect. We're going to look at the Tanstack query docs. Invalidation from mutations. Oh, they do two separate calls. Okay, that makes sense. I passed an array of arrays and I actually don't want that. So I want invalidate that one and then invalidate find all. That's the winner. All right, refresh the page. It loads the to-do. We click toggle done. It's loading. That invalidates the cache. Now the whole thing is loading, and now we see the check mark. Great. Let's add remove, and then I have to leave. So remove is going to be very similar. We have another mutation that on success just invalidates find all, and then go to home page after removing. And this will be is deleting. And then instead of calling this mutate async, this will be update mutate async. Yeah. And then this will be, well, I have to rename it. So mutate async should be renamed to update mutate async. And then mutate async should be renamed to delete mutate async. Like this. Great. This actually doesn't respond. Well, it takes in a to-do, but it doesn't actually respond with anything. And then we can actually just call and this actually just takes in a string. And we'll have a function delete one that takes in the ID. Is ID of type string? Cool. Like that. Okay. So now we need a delete one function, which again is very similar. It just takes in the ID and then calls delete on the endpoint. So this actually doesn't respond with anything, just responds with a 200 status code. So we'll call this delete one. We make a request to to-dos /id, a delete request to to-dos /id, which should delete it. And then over here, we need delete one. So that makes the request to delete it. And then when it's done, we invalidate the query. For remove, we'll say loading is if we are deleting. I think we define that here. So whenever we're calling this mutation, it should show a loading spinner. And then specifically when we click the remove button, we just want to call that mutation. So I'll say when this is clicked, actually I can just pass it in like this. I mean, technically I could define a separate function, but I don't really need to because this is all it's doing. If you're new to Vue, this is probably weird syntax because it looks like I'm actually invoking that right now. But what I'm doing is I'm passing it an expression that should be invoked when I click on it. I believe. Let's try it. So we're here. We click remove. It's loading. And then technically, it should be gone. So if we go back to the home page, there should be nothing called wow. It's not there. But we want to do that automatically. So last thing in the last 3 minutes here is when deleting is done, here, redirect to the home page. And for that, we can grab the router. So I'll say the router is use router, which comes from view router. And then router, I believe, has like a push function on it. So I can say router.push/. So go to the home page when we're done deleting this thing. So now we've learned Vue. We click remove. Takes us back to the home page, and it's not there anymore. Great. So last piece is I'm actually going to remove the slowdown. So I had this 2-second wait time in there just so we could see all of the loading happen. But technically, everything is really fast. Look how fast that loads. And if I go to this page and I toggle it done, it's done. And if I go back to the home page, teach view is done. If I go to edit and click remove, it goes back here. I can go edit, remove, edit, remove, edit, remove. So all of this stuff works pretty quick. I just had an artificial 2-second load time. Yeah, because I wanted to explicitly see that it was loading. Cool, so do that, loading, done, edit, toggle done, go back to the home page, it shows it's done. We've done it. This is our CRUD client. Again, all of this is client-side code, and it's interacting with an Express API that's on the back end here. So this back end is talking to a MongoDB, receiving all of those requests, and responding accordingly. But we've done it. It's pretty great. Cool. Yeah, so this is an exercise for the viewer. If you want to modify this, you could basically, on this edit page, you could make it so that we actually could change the contents of the to-do as well. Right now, you can't. Right now, you can only toggle it done. But you could make it so that when I go to this page, also update this, and then there might be another button called like save, and when you click the save button, that technically would update it afterwards. Yeah. Awesome. I am really happy with this. It's so fun to work with Vue.js. Maybe I should just stop working with React altogether. I mean, I think the main reason I worked with React is because my job used React. They were a React shop. They've been using React for a very long time, so I used React as well. That's why I've written a bunch of React. And honestly, I mean, the reason I write a lot of React these days is because people want to learn React. It's like it's a very in-demand job skill. So that's why I probably won't stop writing React, but I look tired. I just need to go. I mean, I did a bunch of yard work today. I got a bunch of stuff done. I woke up at like 9-ish, ran some errands, came home, did some yard work. I don't know. The thing I'm using right now is called Vue.js. Add Vue features. Cool. I'm actually going to check out my examples branch and then merge those changes I just did into my examples branch. And then push this up to the examples branch, like that. And now on GitHub, I'm actually going to delete the work in progress branch. Cool. So now there's just an examples branch. But I'll share this before I go. If you go to the examples branch and look in the examples folder, that has the backend API that we were talking to. That has the Vue client that we just wrote. And it also has the React client, which we wrote a few, I guess at this point, 21 days ago. This React client, the video for that hasn't been uploaded to the main YouTube channel yet. But if you want to watch the long stream, it is on the archive channel. So if you go to the archive channel, there is, let's see. Is this it? Intro to React with TypeScript and Intro to Application State? This must be it. It was more of like a 5-hour stream. But we built the same app that you just saw me build, but we built it with... Is this... No, this isn't even it. This isn't it. Here it is. Build a CRUD client. This one. This is the video where I built this same app, but with React. But that video is... Yeah, this video is 7 hours long. I'm going to edit this down for the main channel. It should end up being like probably like 2.5 hours long. Regardless, check out the YouTube channel. Follow me over on Twitter. If you want go live notifications, you can sign up for my mailing list. I have a stream schedule at this site. I do plan on going live, not tomorrow, but on Friday. We're going to be working on a Dino app. That's going to be fun. And that's all I got for you. Thank you everybody for hanging out. Thank you for all the supports today. We got a couple of gifts, and thanks. We got 2 raids. Thank you for the raids today, and all of the supports. UXWeb says, how can I accept a type prop for a custom button component and give it a default value of submit? I'm getting the expected type comes from property type, which is declared here on type. It's hard. I think it's hard to describe what you're doing. Yeah, it should be a string. That's one last thing I'll show before I go. Yeah, I'll definitely check the pull requests too, Timon. Happy to. Why is this complaining? But for instance, on our to-do item component, like if I wanted a prop called, I think I get what you're saying. Like pretend this is a button component. I could have a prop called type. I could say that it is, if I just said it's type string, then it could be anything. You specifically want it to be a string that is the type submit. So you could create like a types, like a button types array. Actually, you don't even need an array. You actually could use a union type. It's even easier than that. You can say this is submit, or this is button, or this is something else. And so this is known as a union type, specifically of type strings, but on the opposite side. So when you're using this component, the type completion will say that type has to be one of these three things. I think that's what you're asking, right? And then technically you could look at the HTML button TypeScript type and extract out that its type and reuse it possibly if you wanted to. I think that's what you're asking. Hopefully that helped. Back to there. Okay, let's go on a raid. I don't know if I'm going to do a svelte version. I kind of want to be done with this whole series, at least for now, so I can work on other things. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I do. Because then it almost becomes, like, if you look at the repo, it's almost just like a Rosetta Stone. You know, you can see the the same app built multiple ways. Cool. Let's go on a raid. If you are a sub, you can use this raid message. If you are not a sub, you can use this raid message. And thank you for hanging out. This was a fun Wednesday stream. I realize this wasn't the best time for people in Europe, but a lot of people in the US could tune in right now, and when they normally can't, like in the mornings because they're working and stuff like that. But yeah, have a good evening, everyone, and I'll see you Friday, hopefully. So wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. And until next time, here's this. All right, we're going on a raid to Coding Jedi. I have no idea who they are, but I just saw them in Software and Game Dev, and they're doing some code wars. So show them some love, and we'll see you later.